Granular Store is really where you start to see more on the day-to-day results tip, right? So here we are with, I'm just going to the overview tab here. Now I don't have anything currently mounted, so I wanted to go through the mount process with you guys in real time. And then once we have something mounted, we can look at the content and start picking and choosing things we want to restore, right? So the restore part, or the mount process, I should say, starts at this import and mount tab. Now the very first thing we need to have, obviously, is a backup set performed from this farm backup restore tab, which we covered in the last session, right? So we've backed up some data. We've got things, pools and differentials on the schedule, whatever the case may be. We have a content database backup. We just learned that we need to restore something. So we're going to go into this Granular Restore tab, get this guy mounted up so that we can see the contents in our GUI and start restoring those objects. First thing I do is click on this Mount and Link Content Database button. We're in the Mount wizard. We get this fun little welcome page. We go next. So the first thing we're going to do is select what type of backup set we're going to be mounting, right? So obviously, in our case, we're mounting a Metalogix full farm backup because we took a backup with this tool. That's what we're mounting. But it's worthy of note that we can absolutely mount a native SQL Server.bak file, for instance. The case being, let's say you have a SQL Server instance or a SQL Server maintenance policy that's doing all of your backup and retention for disaster at the highest level for your databases. Well, we can work with those backup sets as well, which really gives some versatility as to how the tool fits into your disaster recovery strategy as a whole. We can also mount and link raw SQL Server data and log files, the MDFs and LDFs. This ties in over to what I was talking about earlier with the out-of-place restore concept from the farm concept, and we'll get back to that. We're going to be doing the Metalogix full farm backup. We can also mount native SharePoint full farm backups, and we can actually link to a live content database, which is kind of an interesting concept. It's a little bit rarer of a use case, but if you can imagine a scenario where you might have a replicated environment or a mirrored SQL Server for redundancy purposes, and let's say something goes down in A, we can always link to the database live in B to pull that data out and get it back to A, so to speak. So hopefully that makes some sense. Again, it's a rare use case, but I think it's a cool little feature. So we're going to go with the Metalogix full farm backup. We'll go next. Here's where we define the target SQL Server that we're going to be using to mount this data. So this, in my case, is going to be my SharePoint SQL Server, but this can really be any SQL Server instance you want. So I mean, if you have the resources and you, let's say you have a dedicated application SQL Server where you host temporary databases or whatever the case may be, that could be the case here. The only caveat there is that we need to have a backup service installed to that SQL Server host, which may entail additional licenses, right? So for my purposes here, I'm just going to go to my SharePoint SQL Server. Let me get this guy next. Oh, and here we're just defining what account we're using to create and attach that database, or really to create the request to SQL Server, and I'll talk more about that in a second. So next, here's where I select the backup set that I want to use to mount from. I've got this Academy demo, and again, this drop-down represents the backup set would be visible in the Farm Backup and Restore tab. So I've chosen Academy demo. I drill in and select the specific database I'm looking to mount. It could be multiple. I've only got the one, but it could be 4 or 5, however many the case may be. We go next. We give it a name that's going to show up as in our GUI. I'm going to go ahead and give it a description. I've learned that you can't over-document things, so it's good to have these description fields. Next, so if I were managing multiple farms, and I'll show you an instance where I am later, I would be able to select which specific farm I'm going to be restoring to, because it is semi-possible to go from farm A to farm B with this granular restore concept. The only consideration is that it must be the same version of SharePoint. So we can take farm data from 2010A and restore that granular data to 2010B, but we can't go, for instance, from 2007 to 2010 or 2010 to 2013 or vice versa. That'd be more of a migration, and we actually have a separate tool to handle that. So here's some really important information. So we get the name of the content database that we're mounting. We get the target SQL Server that we're going to. We get the farm we're restoring to, and most importantly, we get this staging path. The staging path represents where we're going to be hosting this database from for SQL's purposes. So as soon as I hit mount here two operations are going to come up, one of which is this so-called prepare for mount operation, the other being the actual mount. So prepare for mount is pretty much identical to that out-of-place restore concept from the farm. What's happening is we're decompressing that compressed data from the backup set into this CDB files directory, which we create in the backup location that we've specified. So it's already done on my side, but I'll just talk you through this. So prepare for mount, opened up the files and popped them right into this directory. So now I've got a data and log file for SQL Server to work with. And then the mount operation submitted a request to SQL Server and said, hey, SQL, do me a favor, attach a database. Here's the location of the data files. So SQL Server then reads from that network location and hosts the database from that location. And that brings us to the concept of, SQL Server can be finicky about where he will host from. We just have to make sure that network share is set up and the SQL Server has access to it, et cetera, et cetera. But if all is well, as it is in my case, we'll see the mount complete. And I can now take a look at the backup content, some description, et cetera. If I jump over to this Restore tab now, I should see the backup set mounted, and voila, I can now read down into the site collection, subsites, libraries, down to the document level. Let me see if I've got anything in here. There we go. Let's say I want to restore this PDF. I click the button and go in place. So let's look at the actual wizard. So in place, and then we'll talk a little bit about the difference here too. In place, pretty self-explanatory. We're just going directly into where it came from, essentially. So we can decide how many versions we're keeping, whether or not we're keeping the item permissions set as they were, and it's pretty much that simple. We're going directly back where you came from, no big whoop, right? For out of place, we have a couple of other options. Oops, let me go ahead and select that again. So we have a couple of other options. We'll see in an intermediary step here where I can select the particular web application to which I'm restoring. Right. So if I wanted to, I could choose to move it to a different site collection or subsite or wherever the case may be, right? My apologies for the cropping in the background. Right. Pretty standard stuff, no real surprises there. So restore versus quick restore for in place, right? Restore will overwrite whatever's there. Like let's say I have an entire library selected that has 10 files within it, 5 of which have changed since the backup was taken. I click restore, all 10 files get overwritten. If I use quick restore, the tool takes some time to discover what's different and only replace those items which have changed since the backup set was taken. So it's kind of like a delta restore, right, or a differential restore, so to speak. In most cases, you're probably going to be moving out of place, moving stuff from one place to another, or going right back in place where it came from, in which case restore is the way to go. So that's like crash course, highest level, mount and restore discussion. I want to switch gears for just a minute over to the other farm I have over here, just to look at another farm I've got. Actually, let me open it over here. All right, so I've got, not that tool. I'll just stick here. Just want to quickly demonstrate the multiple farms concept here. As you can see, I can now view and manage and backup and restore to and from 2 separate environments. Now, in my case, since they're cross-version, I won't be able to granular restore from this guy to this guy or vice versa. But as you can see, if I had multiple 2010 farms, we'd be able to move between those guys. And that, if you remember in our mount wizard, would have been, we'd be, whenever we mounted, that last step would have asked us which farm we're going to be restoring to, and that's where we define that, right? Just a little extra information, I guess. So all that said, and I am really flying here, so we're going to have to get some questions in real quick if we can. So that's kind of the important amount. The only thing I wanted to talk about is really considerations with this functionality, because at the end of the day, we are absolutely creating files in a location, and we are absolutely creating a database on the farm. So now if I go to my SQL instance, again, we mounted this Academy demo WSS content, right? Over in SQL, we'll now see a temporary database created called ml_temp_db_WSS content _timestamp. That's obviously MetaLogic's temporary database, name of the content database, and then today's date, or the time at which you mounted, right? So for all intents and purposes, this is a fully functional content database. I mean, it's just a straight up attached database. Again, we're just reading those data files from that location. We've attached that database. What this does is gives us access to all the bits within. But when I'm done, from my overview tab, let's say, the library or the content that was lost has been restored. We went in here, we went to our Restore tab. We navigated down to what we needed. We clicked the Restore button. Everything went back where it came from. We're happy. We're done. We go to Overview, Delete Operation. It's going to spin for a second. That will disappear, and then if we go over here and refresh our database list, we'll see that that database no longer exists. So everything's cleaned up from right within the console. The only caveat to that, the only thing to keep in mind is we don't delete from this file location. So those data files remain there in case we need to get back to that backup set for another restoration. In case that the data was staged not on our staging file, but in the SQL Server staging location or network path that you don't want to be deleting from willy-nilly. In future versions, I'm sure we'll add some grooming logic to manage our staging path, but for now, you just need to go in and clean this stuff up after the restore operation. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and delete one of them, but I'm going to keep that one in case I need to get back in. So now if I need to get back to that data, I can select the SQL Server data and log file option, and I can add the location directly, right? And now when I go through this next, SQL Server is going to look here instead of going through the whole process of decompressing and all that other fun stuff.